Right now, let's do our first SEC Spring Football Focus. We go to Athens, Georgia, and bring in from Dogs247.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network, covering the Georgia Bulldogs on a daily basis. Gentry Estes joins us here on the new Sentinel Sports Page. Hey, Gentry, Vince and Jesse Smithey. How you doing, Gentry?
Hey, I'm good. Good to be with you guys.
Well, I appreciate it. Great to be with you as always. And the spring game this past weekend, and obviously you don't want to get too caught up in the stats. You've been around, you certainly know that. But what did you sense in hearing Mark Richt talk throughout spring practice? How pleased was he with his team overall in the work they tried to get done in those spring practices?
Well, I think anybody would tell you. I don't think anybody around the country is going to have a bad spring, but some things did stand out in the G-Day game. That for one, I think Georgia's front seven on defense is going to be very good. Actually, first they go about two deep in that front seven, and neither offense was able to run the ball a whole lot. I don't know if that's an indictment of Georgia's offensive line up front or the defense, but I do think the defense is going to be very good, especially in the middle. Guys like John Jenkins and Kwame Gathers kind of setting the tone there, and you got Jarvis Jones, and they bring in some good recruits there too. So I think the defense is going to be pretty good again. And, offensively, they're still kind of feeling their way a little bit. I think Murray, he played about half the game, got hot at one point, but, was kind of hit or miss. And I think that the running backs as a whole have had a pretty good spring as well. I think Isaiah Crowell did. I think Malcolm did. So, the arrow's pointing up there right now, too.
Gentry, as I look through the handwritten box score that Georgia sent out to the media, one of the names I saw in there was, of course, Marlon Brown, a receiver from the Memphis area that a lot of Tennessee fans lamented the loss over in the recruiting process. But now, a couple years into his career at Georgia, has really been a non-factor. Is this the year that he starts to break his mold that he's created those first 2 years there and maybe becomes one of these elite receivers?
Well, I think that's the hope for Georgia. I think that, Marlon he's kind of running out of time now, but his first 2 years he was kind of behind A.J. Green as that guy. And, last year he had what coaches were saying was a really good preseason, and he sprained his ankle the last week of preseason camp. Wound up missing a few games and then, still being a little gimpy on it for about half the year. And I think that really set him back then. And, I think Marlon definitely has the potential. He's a big kid. He can make plays, but I don't know if he's really going to be the A.J. Green 5-star kind of guy that maybe he was projected out of high school, but I think he could be a very serviceable receiver for them this year, and I think they're going to rely on him to be.
Keith Marshall wasn't available. A number of players didn't get a chance to participate in Saturday's spring game, but what kind of camp prior to that did the really talented, highly recruited running back Keith Marshall have for Georgia this spring?
Well, he really was only out there about half the time. About halfway through, he pulled his hamstring, and they set him out the rest of the way. I think he did some good things. He was still kind of feeling his way through, obviously. I mean, he just enrolled, and, they were working with him on being a little more physical and pass protection and things like that, the normal stuff for freshmen. But I think he's a good player. It was a shame, that we all didn't get a chance to see him play in the spring game. And another one was Malcolm Mitchell, moved to cornerback this spring. That was kind of a big storyline, and he hurt his hamstring too, so he didn't play in that spring game. People didn't get to see that either, and those were two things I think people were really looking forward to seeing if they didn't get a chance to see.
And when we had you on before spring practice started, one of the things you pointed out was the secondary, and seemed to be pretty thin back there. Part of the reason why Malcolm Mitchell moved back there. What are some of the developments, I guess, in the secondary other than Mitchell getting hurt and some other guys competing for spots back there?
Well, they're going to have some suspensions to start the season.
Yeah.
There are two cornerbacks, and Brandon Smith and Sanders Cummings, and it's been reported that Bakari Rambo's safety is going to miss a bunch of games to start the year too. So, you needed some other guys to step in, and I think there was some signs of that. I think Damian Swan, who'll be a true sophomore this year, I think he's a star in the making for that secondary. I think he's really going to step in and play a lot this year at corner. He was a guy they needed to have a good spring, and I think he did. At safety, another true sophomore named Corey Moore made some steps, and I think he'll play a big role on this defense too by the end of the year. And those two things were kind of the big developments, I guess. But there's still they're still pretty thin back there. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Mitchell. They're still not committing to his move as a full-time move right now. I think there's a good chance he's going to play on both sides of the ball. And I think when those suspensions are up, maybe after the first 2 games of the year, you could see Mitchell back as a receiver. So I think that'll be something to watch all through September.
I want to go back to something you said about Georgia's front seven, them being too deep at those positions. When you look at Crowell, this could really benefit him, right? I mean, I'm sure Georgia fans would have loved to see him rush for 150 yards in the G-Day game, but if he's getting that type of experience, those type of reps against a pretty talented front and linebackers, it's only going to benefit that run game.
It should, and I think more so really with the O-line than Crowell. The O-line is probably, at this point, at least from the starters, is probably the biggest question on the team right now. There's probably 2 guys I think that have locked up spots for the fall, and the rest of it's a real question mark for Georgia right now. And they mixed and matched and changed positions a lot this spring, and kind of moved guys around to try to find the best fit among the 5. And they really didn't have a lot of continuity. And in the fact that they had trouble running the ball was kind of a theme of the whole spring. Each of the scrimmages, just the rushing numbers were never really that great. And I do think in Isaiah's case, I think the biggest stride he made was the fact that he stayed healthy the whole time, and he had said that was a goal of his, that he wanted to prove to coaches he could do it because he had a lot of little nagging things come up last year, and he was able to do that. Had by all reports a pretty good spring, and another tailback named Ken Malcolm also ended up having a real good spring, and actually was the number 1 guy during G-Day and got the most improved player from the offensive coaches. So I think those 2 guys both took steps forward. You've also got Keith Marshall, and you've got another recruit named Todd Gurley, who is pretty highly touted, is going to come in and push there too. So I think right now Georgia is going to have at least 4 good options at that position.
Gentry hit on a couple other positions. First, tight end, replacing Orson Charles, and also special teams, what you've been able to gather from spring practice and the special teams.
Special teams, really, that there's not a whole lot decided on that. They lost Blair Walsh and Drew Butler, and 2 seniors, and I think the odds-on favorite to be the kicker and the punter next year are true freshmen that aren't on campus yet. So they really didn't compete that very much with the walk-ons that were there. So I think special teams is still wide open as it can be heading into August. I think tight end, a guy named Artie Lynch, a native of Massachusetts, is going to be the top tight end this year. And real big kid, kind of looks like a pro wrestler, really. I mean, this bodybuilder type, great blocker. Kind of needed to prove he could catch the ball, and I think he did. I think he had a good spring and showed some ability in the passing game. And the backup to him will be a redshirt freshman named Jay Rome, who is athletic enough where he played for Georgia's basketball team this last year. He caught a 66-yard touchdown in the spring game, and it was a deep ball where he caught it between 2 defenders, kept his balance, and then scored. It was a pretty impressive play, and I think you're going to have Lynch there as kind of your bookend for the run blocking, and you're going to have Rome as maybe a little more of a threat in the passing game. But obviously without Orson Charles, I think Georgia is probably going to approach this season using a few more receivers than normal, maybe going 4 wide a little more than they had in the past. And I know Georgia is known for using the tight end, and there just might not be as much of that this year.
Gentry, has your impression of this football team, Georgia, has it changed at all post-spring as opposed to going into spring?
Well, I think everybody would have known that the defense is really where they're going to hang their hat this year. And the defense was a top 5 national defense last year. And, they've got 9 starters back on that side of the ball. So I think every expectation is that they're going to be just as good, if not better, on defense this year. The defense has the potential to be very good as Georgia's maybe had under Rick. And I think that in the SEC, if you have that kind of defense that can shut teams down and do that, I think you're going to have a pretty good team. And when you also look at the fact that you've got an experienced quarterback, a pretty deep stable of running backs, and some capable receivers, it looks pretty good for Georgia right now. They need to get things shored up on the offensive line, and the suspensions early in the year in the secondary could really hurt. But other than that, I think there's every expectation that Georgia could win at least 10 games this year and challenge for the East. And that hasn't changed in my mind.
Gentry Estes and staff covering the Georgia Bulldogs on the 24/7 Sports Network. It's dogs247.com. You can follow Gentry on Twitter as well, Gentry Estes 247. Gentry, always great to talk to you. Really appreciate what you do for us.
Okay, take care, guys.
Thanks, Gentry. That's Gentry Estes from dogs247.com.
The Vols play here. The Sports Animal.